like to thank Bishop John for being with us this afternoon and providing this opportunity for us to ask questions of him, for him to share some of his wisdom with us, and hopefully to leave us with a better understanding of our faith and the preparation process and the thoughts we need as we prepare for the Nativity of our Lord coming up, of course, which is why we're here with the display. So we could just start right off with questions, or Bishop John, did you have anything by way of introduction that you...
No, I really don't.
All right, well, who might have a question they'd like to ask? Michael?
Yeah, Mr. John, I'd like to get your take on, with the eparchial gathering and the pastoral plan, on where you see the eparchy and the parishes going. If you could kind of like give us a condensed version of where you see it going and what you expect from all this, something we may be able to understand a little clearer.
Okay. Probably what I'll end up doing is just giving you fodder for more questions, but that's okay. I guess the big thing is if we look around and we see the advances that secularism is really seems to be in control of the world. That I was chatting with someone out the other room, we were talking about the Middle East and how the various religions, that this seems to be the basis for the conflict there. You know, that we have the particular ISIS group of Muslims against the Christians, but they're also against part of the other Muslims, you know, different sects within the Muslim community. And why Turkey seems to be a little bit more peaceful. And basically, Turkey is a very secular country. And so the people living next door to each other would say, well, my family used to be Muslim, your family used to be Christian. Let's forget about that. We don't practice religion anymore. It's not important. We can just continue. Well, again, in a way, even Christian unity. We may look and say, well, we used to be Catholic, we used to be Protestant, we used to be Orthodox, but now where everything is settled, and we can finally find some peace. And that will be presented to us, that if you really want peace, you've got to come down to common denominator. And common denominator does not include God. And common denominator really includes a humanistic idea. Yeah, we're all human beings, and everybody has to kind of allow themselves to live the way they want to, and that somehow this will give us peace. This will provide. But if we look at what Christianity has really provided, you know, to the world, the culture that the world has today is largely been the result of a Christian approach. And the reason that Christianity has had such an impact on culture is that God became a human being. And that element of Christianity is a very important element. All the nativity scenes out here, yeah, they're pretty, they can be kind of, almost reduction of Christianity. People can have a nativity scene in Italy. It's more common to have a nativity scene than a Christmas tree. But again, it can be a very secular concept, a cultural concept, and it can be reduced to that. And so, to get back to your point, this secularism, this reduction of humanity to this elevated animality, just being an animal, you know, the naked ape we used to talk about in the 60s. If we allow that to happen, we really cannot proceed. And so we believe, if we really believe that Christianity is what God wants for the world, if we really believe that Jesus Christ died and that he was God, is God, and that God died for us, he was born for us, he lived for us, he lived the same life that you and I live, then our whole life is lifted. And humanity is no longer just the highest level of the animal kingdom. It is in fact given that opportunity to approach God through this spirit concept of theosis that the Byzantine Church really promotes. This progression that you don't just step from being an animal to being a child of God, that it's not a stepping over a threshold, you know. Again, yes, you must accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. And yes, you must accept him as your, and you must be committed to him. But it's not a one-time event. It is a progression. And so our Byzantine Catholic Church has a lot to offer the world. Unfortunately, the disruption in history of the 60s and 70s, which really did disrupt history, and people start now to say, well, it was always that way. You know, it wasn't. There was a continuum. People understood the place of God for the longest time. Oh, a lot of us in the 40s and 50s, and probably from the 20s even, you know, you start thinking of the flappers. A few of us here will remember that. At least by history we will. We read about it. Yeah. But in the 40s and 50s, more of us would remember that. Religion, it was important, but it was on the sideline. It wasn't really the basis of our life. Because again, the World War II, World War I for that matter as well, kind of disrupted history. And threw us, threw the wives out of the home, the parents, the mothers, put them into business and forced them to be the Riveter. What was her name? Rosie the Riveter.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, you were forced to do that. And it was accepted, and we've seen many women who have really contributed greatly to society. You know, especially since that time. But it kind of threw things out of kilter, and so they associated that with even their faith life. And so, but then in the 60s, it got to such an extreme that, I remember, don't trust anybody over 30, you know? We didn't want to deal with those people because they didn't understand, you know? This is a new world. It's a new world order. And everything has changed now. And so everything that happened before, and certainly the entry of God into the world, was before that disruption. And so now we don't need that anymore. Let's get on with our life. Let's let that die already. And so as we look around today in our churches, we see that all of us are affected by that attitude. That Christianity, our faith, is not the basis of our life. For many of us, it's an added feature. You know, oh yes, I have this job, and we live in this house, and we have this mortgage to pay, and we also go to this church, you know? Whereas if you talk to somebody in the Middle East, a Christian in the Middle East, who is faced with somebody that says either convert to Muslim or die. And they say, how could we let God? If you force me to convert, I'm dead. So you may as well kill me. I wonder how many of us would have that attitude. And so this is really what this pastoral plan, very humbly, is trying to do. It's trying to say that our churches need to get back to promoting that basic Christian faith and get all of us back on track. Conversion, kind of a continual conversion. You know, you'll hear that more in the Latin church. But, or get back on the theosis. Okay, well now we have this. And theosis, just a couple words about that. That this is a divinization. It is a journey from God to God. Okay, yes, we are going back to God someday. You know, and are we really thinking about that? Are we really considering that? And do we really believe that God is present here in the world? And so the church, Jesus Christ founded our church to continue the message that he brought. You know? And it's up to us to spread that word. So the effort is to try to help us to realize that if we are cooperating with God, if we're doing what he wants us to do, he'll take care of the rest. Sometimes, again, this secular mentality that we have developed over the years is, if you don't do it, it don't get done. You know? If I don't do it, if I don't raise the money, the bills aren't going to get paid. But God says, you know, put that in my hand. If you are with me, I will take care of you. I will be with you till the end of the age. You know? And just kind of bear with me for continuing. I'm way off this topic. Something that just came to me recently at the meeting of the Catholic bishops in Baltimore in November. I guess it's still November. About a few weeks ago. They talked about accompaniment. You know? And at our assembly, the priest who taught the first evening talked about that the church, in a way, had this attitude of providing for people. Okay, we are going to provide everything you need to get to heaven. And the people said, oh good, all I have to do is come and open my mouth and I'll get fed and I will be ushered into heaven. That somebody else is going to do it for me. But in truth, the church was never founded to do that. Even Jesus didn't do that. He didn't give each person who came to him the wherewithal to get to heaven. He gave them what they needed at the moment so that they could cooperate with him. It is a cooperation between humanity and divinity. And this is what we're talking about with theosis. We're talking about this divinization. Is that whatever reason God decided to do this, to allow us to be part of this effort. He could easily have done it. He could have put us on earth and told us, okay, now just stay there for a while, and then at the end of your life, I will take you back and put you in heaven. But he didn't. He said, no, you have have a free will. You can, first of all, you can reject this, but then too, you can cooperate with me. You can live your life according to the plan that I give you, but it's not just taking care of yourself. It's a community effort. I'm putting you here on earth to continue the work that I did in Galilee in those days. And so, how did Jesus do it? He didn't just provide, but he was there with them. And he saw, first of all, he saw what they needed. It was an encounter between God and his humanity. There was this encounter. He listened to them. He heard. Maybe not, he didn't need to. They didn't need to tell him. He's God. He knew what they needed. But he allowed them to speak. He allowed them to show themselves in their illnesses and paralysis. To admit that they were weak before him. He allowed them to come to him as they were. He didn't expect them to go and get all cleaned up to come to the doctor. You don't know? He was willing to deal with them as they were. St. Paul says, you know, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. He didn't wait till we got rid of the sin. And so that encounter was the first step. And then he accompanied. And this was what came up at the meeting. I don't remember who brought it up. You can read about it in the newspaper too. It was in my article. But this concept of accompaniment, Pope Francis is really emphasizing that now. And he's certainly one who is willing to go out and listen. He told the priests, you're supposed to be a shepherd of the sheep. He said, you got to get out there and get the smell of the sheep on you. You know? He said, I want to smell the sheep on you. You know, how important, what a beautiful image. But it's accompanied. And it's not just the priests who are to be this accompanied. You know, how do we really work in a family? You know, yeah, if all the parents are providers, oh, it's an important role, don't get me wrong. You know, only the parents are able to go out and get a job and earn the money to buy the food, to give the food to the children, without a doubt. But if that's all they are, what a terrible loss. What a loss. If that parent is not accompanying the child in his or her life, and you accompany, you don't become another child. They don't need another child. Yeah, there are times when you get childish and you get down on the floor and you play like a child, of course. But the child needs accompanied by a true adult parent. But that accompaniment is really a loving relationship. This loving relationship. And so relationship is more important than providing. And so building those relationships, and that is part of this plan. I don't know how it's going to play out. I wish I did. But it's already starting to play out. It's interesting. You know, in various parishes that are starting to think about it, all you have to do is start to think about it and it happens. Because it's natural. It's what we need. It's what how God created us. He created us to accompany each other, and to accompany in different ways. Brother Miron was telling me that some people were saying, this parish doesn't do this, and this parish doesn't do that. And he said some people were hurt because they were already doing these things. Yeah. Some of us have to be pillars of the parish, and some have to be on the periphery. And if you're a pillar, that's what God expects of you. Unfortunate. It's not fair. Not fair. Only children tell their parents that. It's not fair, you know. It's not. God never promised that life would be fair. And again, I'm sure most of you parents have said that already. God never promised that life would be fair. It's not. But it is fair in that each of us has a special vocation that God has given us. And so that's one of the basic focuses of this pastoral plan is vocation. Yeah. You know, it would be, you know, oftentimes, you know, we prefer to do somebody else's work because it would be easier. And then we realize, you know, well, you know, I don't have the talent to do that other work. And so maybe it's just as well that I stay with what I'm doing. But God will give the grace for us to do what we need to do. And it's not an option. And so, again, Jesus, in his relationship with others, he first encountered them, he listened to them, he noted what was going on in their life, and then he provided just an accompaniment. Sometimes he just, you know, he talked to the rich young man. The rich young man came to him and he talked and he said, okay, he came to him and he said, good teacher, da-da-da-da-da. Okay, you want me to be a teacher? I'll teach you. And he taught him. And the rich young man said, well, that was very good, but can't handle it. And so he walked away. Jesus was willing to be with him at that moment. And then he let him go. And sometimes we need to do that too. But the concept of accompaniment, I just think it's a beautiful concept. And it's not Pope Francis didn't come up with it. He apparently studied better in seminary than I did. But it kind of got into his very person. And so he is now using that term, that we must accompany. And we look around the world, and he's saying, you know, okay, there are some people who are divorced and remarried. Oh, well, they can't be part of our church, you know, we just have to push them aside. He said, no! He said, listen to them, encounter them, accompany them, be with them where they are. Yeah, you know, there are, things that happen because of what you do, consequences that you have to live with. But it doesn't isolate or it doesn't exclude anybody. We can accompany anyone. People with same-sex attraction. He's saying, okay, marriage is marriage. We're not denying that. But we can still accompany someone who secular society has told can live this lifestyle. Okay, it's not the best lifestyle for this person. We believe that they could, you know, either live a celibate life or a married life. But if you can't, you know, we are there for you. We're there for you as you are, not as we would want you to be. And then, the third step is the witness. He's saying, okay, now, how do you get to, how do you reach these people? Do you get there by hounding, by nagging, by quoting scriptures, by insisting that this is true and that's not true? Well, there's some truth to that. I mean, that some people wake up when you say, well, you know, even Jesus said this, you know. But most of the time, The way it comes is through witness. Witness. If people see the true effect of Christianity on our lives, they're going to want it. They really are. But we have to allow it to enter and to really take over our life. And again, we've seen, and again, there's no guarantee. Don't get me wrong. We know wonderful. I know I can think of an old lady in my first parish who talked to God every day, most of the day. She was just so caught up in God it wasn't funny. And she had two sons and 2 daughters. The one daughter went to church, the other 3 just had no use for church. But the one son had his whole family go to church, and they're still very effective. And I just heard recently that this lady died probably 10 years ago. And just recently, the one son came back to church. It was just his time. And he said he remembered his mother. Or Lincoln talking about how his mother's prayers stayed with him all his life. The witness, it has no guarantee, and very seldom is there an immediate response. Very seldom. But give it time. You may never see the result of a Christian witness. But if you're not being Christian, if you are being insistent or, like I say, nagging or belligerent, nasty about the whole thing, well, most people are going to realize that that's not the way God deals with us, the way He loves us. And so, the effort, getting back to Mike's question, the effort is really to try to help our church of the Eparchy of Parma and our various parishes to be strong witnesses to God's love for us, to God's efforts in the world, to show how God is present in the world. We would love it if people would speak to us like the Ephesians did about the Christians. See how they love each other. What a wonderful way to get things started. A wonderful way. But again, it can't be a love that's fenced in. When in our wedding ceremony, we talk about exclusive love between husband and wife. Exclusive love between husband and wife. But before they leave, we remind them that as a couple, may you have whatever you need to show your love, your common love, your Christian love as a couple to the world. Primarily through your children, but not only through your children. Allow that love that you have, that exclusive love that you have between yourselves, to be the way that the world sees you, and that you affect the world around you. And so our parishes, we want our parishes to do that as well. Again, we do not apologize for our founders coming from specific regions of the world, from Carpatho Rus and Hungary and Croatia, especially our churches. But we're not going to exclude people who don't share that ethnic heritage. Those of us with that ethnic heritage, again, no apologies for it. in truth, in a way, because of their faith, their ethnic heritage kind of grew up around it. And so if you see something of that, there is a faith element in just about everything, you know? Again, you know, people talk about the Russians today, but that was never a word. Nobody talked about Russian. Were you Slovak? No. Are you Hungarian? No. Are you Ukrainian? No. Well, what are you? We're Greek Catholic. Yeah. And then after a while, well, no, we really need a word. Okay. But at any rate, getting back, okay, well, no, we're not Ukrainian. Well, if you're not Ukrainian, you must be something, okay, we're Ruthenian. The Romans gave us that term. But Rome gave it, I should say. But there is nothing that excludes a human being from our care. What evangelization, the goal of evangelization is full communion, is full membership in the church. But if that cannot be reached, we will take whatever level of unity we can get. If all you can do is to live a Christian life and be affected and allow us to inspire that, then that's fine. You know, that's okay. If you can't live according to all the precepts that the church puts out, well, you know, we wish you would. I would like you to reconsider this. But if you can't, don't separate yourself from us. And so again, the four focuses of the pastoral plan that we talked about at the most recent assembly. First of all was the deepening of discipleship. It was getting back to the basics of the faith. And then vocation. Realizing that the church is not just a community or a congregation of people. Building the parishes. Allowing that we have this structure already in place where the bishop shares his authority with a local pastor. And that pastor has a special role. And he expects the people within the parish to live according to their rules too. And that works out. Vocation is the term. And the fourth one, mental block here. Sacramental practice. We found that the way that faith goes from the head to the heart is by experiencing the presence of God. And that is most intimately through sacramental practice, through the sacraments, especially confession and communion. And so, yes, we are trying to help people to realize the blessings of that. You know, I remember when I took my first holy confession, you know, quite a few years ago, scared to death every time since then, even till today. It's not scared to death, but tension. There is a tension there. There's an acknowledgement of weakness. It's an acknowledgement of sin in our life. It's acknowledgement that I'm not in control. And I don't like that. You know, I don't like admitting it. But it's the only way. You know, you go to the doctor and you say, oh, how are you? I'm fine. You know, well, do you have any pains? Well, I got a little pain over there. Well, let me look at it. You know, well, you know, you realize you've got a cancer. Oh, you know, well, you know, I have to admit it before I can get it healed. you know? And it, again, we all are in that boat. Men worse with their bodies, I think, than women, but admitting that kind of weakness. But in truth, you know, just not the body, it's the spirit, it's our whole being. We need to regularly step back and allow God to acknowledge and allow ourselves to go to Him and say, you know, I'm weak, I've done this, I've done that, you know. And allow Him to give you that confidence that it's okay. So that is really what we're looking at. Now, we talk about a big effort. But in truth, the whole church has done this over and over again. Try to get back on track. And we're not completely off track. Don't get me wrong. You know, we are not off track. But we may not be quite as in line with the track as we could be. And so I think, again, we could step back and say, well, we're just this little church, we're the Byzantine church, we just take care of the immigrants from those special regions and their descendants. And when they no longer need us, we die. And we're just going to step aside. And okay, there are many people out there that need them. Well, there's bigger churches who could take care of them. And basically, my attitude is, I can't believe that that's what God would want for any of us, especially our church. We have such a treasure. We have a wonderful treasure. We cannot bury it. Say, well, we only have 1,000 talents. Let the guy with the 5,000 talents take care of the world. We're going to take care of ourselves. We're just going to bury it. No, can't do that. Even Jesus said, if you bury it, it just has no fruit. It cannot bear fruit. Burying something and planting it are two different things. And so, this is what we hope.
I have a question, Bishop. And it goes right along with community and relationship. When St. Anne's hosted Ladies' Day Out, or last January, we noticed and we heard consistently from women from other parishes on how important it was to come together as women and to share and to talk on a fellowship level, just to get to know one another. Is that something that we should promote through St. Anne's, to reach out to other parishes to come together as one? If so, how, any other ideas on how we can promote that? I just wanted to know your opinion on that.
Inter-parish activity is certainly very helpful and very useful. And I would certainly encourage any effort that can be made in that level. Truth be told, most of the work of the church happens in the parish. First of all, this is not a neighborhood parish. None of our parishes are neighborhood parishes anymore. You're already coming in from distances. Okay, so if you go even and stretch that radius out a little further and include more people into the circle, that's fine and that's wonderful. Fellowship is absolutely, without a doubt, the first step in any evangelization effort. It is absolutely fellowship. If you don't have a friendliness among people, you know, if people are divided apart from each other, they can never come together in communion, which is that fourth step, you know, with full communion. But fellowship, common service, and proclamation of the gospel and teaching, those are steps, if you will, to that deep communion. And so absolutely, whatever we can do at that level of fellowship, I encourage it strongly. And yes, sometimes, okay, who are we fellowshipping with, you know? Well, people who already are in communion. Well, just because you've gone to that fourth level of communion doesn't mean that those first three are not important. It's still important to have that fellowship. It's still important to provide service, Christian service to others. And it's still important to continue to learn and deepen your faith. Yeah, very good.
Bishop?
Recently, obviously from Rome, we now hear that married men can become deacons and priests. How do you feel that that will impact us?
Well, I don't really remember the synod of, it was back somewhere.
1880.
No, back in the 500s or 600s, when there were 5 patriarchates around the Roman Empire. And they all decided this was the limits of the patriarchate. Okay, the Coptics from Alexandria and Egypt took care of this section, and the ones around Palestine wouldn't enter in. Everybody was equal, and Rome was over here, and opposite for you. But, and so they split all this up. Well, then they realized, well, there's the rest of the world. Well, who's going to take care of the rest of the world? Well, they came together, and they decided that Constantinople would take care of it. Unfortunately, there was not a representative of Rome at the time, because Rome said, no, Rome takes care of the rest of the world. Well, they weren't there. They had this decision. Rome didn't accept it. So Rome basically said that, okay, the churches, this is your part of the world, we're taking care of the rest of the world, which they called the barbarians. Okay, so Rome is taking care of the rest of the world. Well, of course, there was the split in 1054, and well, now all of a sudden, all of the churches started spreading out. People were migrating, you know. Okay, so now, but Rome still had that concept. Yes, and then these churches started to reunite with Rome, like our church did, or the Maronites never split. But Rome basically said, okay, you come back into the church, you can take care of your own, you can, in your region, and that's your obligation. And that's your only obligation. Well, of course, the migration happened, and a lot of the Greek Catholics came to the United States. But again, Rome understood that the United States was the responsibility of the Roman Church. So they, again, they're a minority. They come to this country, they're a minority. They're trying to fit in. This American experiment is still developing, even after almost 100 years, to the late 1800s. And the church is somewhat accepted. It's stable. It's all the same, you know, throughout. They're all doing the same Latin liturgy and such. And, you know, they finally got the Protestants to look away and not to get too upset. Now all of a sudden got all this immigration coming in, and now these Greek Catholic priests coming in who are married. Well, it was bad enough they have their own liturgy, but nobody has to see it. So, you know, we don't think, well, yeah, married priests. Okay, well, this is just too much. It's going to confuse everybody. There's going to be terrible scandal. There's the good order of the church is going to be disappointed. So, and truth be told, the United States, the responsibility of evangelizing the United States is the Latin Church, the Roman Church. So these others who are coming in, they're taking care of themselves, that's fine. But they don't need to deal with the rest of the world. And so they can come as long as they follow the rules that are been set down for the Roman Church. If you come, you deal with everything else, you have your funny liturgy, and we accept you. In a way, but if you're back in your own homeland, we don't care. You know, that's your area, fine, you do what you're going to do. Not that the Latin Church didn't work its way into the homeland, you know? But again, that's another point. Okay, so the point that Gene was talking about, the late 1893, I think it was, the Synod of Baltimore, they came up and they said, you know, absolutely we cannot have these married priests in the United States. We are having enough trouble being accepted as a Catholic community, and now with all these Catholics coming in, they went, the Latin Church had already gone through an issue with Germans coming in and wanting to have their services in German, or wanting to have separate churches, German churches, separate from the English-speaking churches. Well, they kind of accepted that after a long time. It took a long time for them to accept that. Now all of a sudden there's Italians and Slovenians and Slovaks and Polish, and you're getting all these churches and everything else. It was really a mess. And they're saying, you know, all of a sudden our good order is out the window. And now this group wants to come in with married priests. Out of the question. You know, it's like the Fiddler on the Roof. You know, well, I can take this and I can take that. Oh, that's just too much. It's just the straw that broke the camel's back. And so they petitioned Rome, and Rome agreed with it. That this was outside the reach. They had no obligation to be here except to take care of their own people. And so, in a way, it's similar to the way that we treated the Native Americans. As long as you stay on the reservation, you follow your own rules, you step off the reservation, you follow our rules. You know? And in order, it's proven to be a good order, good approach for that particular community. But, again, we came here with this approach, or this pastoral style of married clergy. And so, yes, thank God that there were many priests who were able to accommodate. And we modified our approach, and we became very Latinized because of that. That was one thing that brought a lot of the Latin influences in. That was a very obvious element in Latinizing our church. Well then, as we start to look at how we may really affect the church at large, I was speaking to a priest that I went to seminary, same seminary I was, but maybe 10 years earlier, and he said, oh, you know, you've got such beautiful liturgy and everything, and ours is in shambles at the time. And he said, you should be trying to bring people in from the Latin Church. And I said, we're not up to the proselytize. We take whoever comes to us, but we're no problem. He said, oh, you should. You know, when I was in seminary, we were taught that we were to try to get those Greek Catholics to join the Latin Church. That was one of our goals, you know, is to try to help them to come to the true church. Okay? Well, so here we are. We were on the reservation. Now we've kind of created these little pockets of reservation, if you will. And now, so the Latin Church now is looking at us and saying, you know, if we are really interested in evangelization, we've got to reach out and allow everybody to get involved in it. We can no longer divide the world up like we did initially and say only the Latin Church can do this. This was especially true. I mean, really strongly true in India. The Cyril Malabar, the church, the Catholic Church in India came from Thomas the Apostle, and they settled in this one state called Kerala, and they were all Cyril Malabar. The Portuguese came to India with Latin Catholic, and so then the Cyril Malabar said, well, okay, we'll send missionaries. Oh no, you can't have Cyril Malabar outside of Kerala. All the missionaries that came from Cyril Malabar churches had to become Latin, to form Latin churches. Only recently were they allowed outside of Kerala, maybe 10 years. Believe it or not. But that was a big step. And now this is a second big step. I believe that it is as a call to us to say, okay, you want the fullness of your church the same way here as you had it there? Live up to it. Okay? The whole world is yours. My take on it. I'm not sure that's in their mind, in all of the Latin churches' mind. But I believe, and I'm not saying that a married priest is a better evangelizer than a celibate priest. We still have a great respect for and cherish the concept of a celibate clergy. We've found progress in our church because of the celibate clergy that probably wouldn't have happened otherwise. The introduction of the married clergy now is really, I think, coming in as a new approach. It's not a pickup from where they were before. Again, the married clergy that came to here from the homeland were like Lord of the Manor, kind of above the peasants, and they had that pan melody or concept you would call the wives' pan, which they don't mind in Europe today because every man is pan and every woman is pani, But at the time, there was that concept that they were better. That is, we're seeing is no longer present in the married clergy. But then too, many of the celibate clergy took on that same attitude. Not that they were given it, but some of us anyway. I guess we all do when we have that opportunity. So I believe, to be honest, my take on it is not that it's going to change everything. I don't see that it's going to be the answer to the vocation crisis. If you were in Brazil, the Brazilian Latin bishops down there are asking for a married clergy. I was with the Franciscans, we sent priests to Brazil. Half of them got married because the people there said, this is crazy. Why are you not married? You should be married. Why don't you take my daughter? And they did. And some of them, continued to be priests. But it was just so totally foreign to their culture to have an unmarried man in the community. That there is real difficulty there. That's not the case, I don't think, in the United States. I think we certainly have more than a strong respect for those who realize that they're not called to marry and remain unmarried. And so the priests could be effective in that situation. But, and I think that the married priests coming here are not, well, first of all, they're shoulder to shoulder with these celibates who kind of, yeah, but I don't want to compare. Speak about, their take on life, but it is. I mean, it's a difficult life. The priesthood, it's a great sacrifice to accept that vocation to the priesthood. It's a great sacrifice. We used to just, you want to be a priest, you're going to have to give up marriage. That's a sacrifice if you're called to marriage. But believe me, the sacrifices go way beyond that. The sacrifice of being, separate from every family. Having a relationship with each family, but still being separate. And being forced to be separate. And so, yeah, that's a major sacrifice for the priest. And the married priest, he experiences it, and his family does as well. So he shares that sacrifice with the family. But he still has the sacrifice. And that, yeah, maybe it's a little bit easier in that he shares it. But the priests have a fraternity among themselves, that they do share that sacrifice with each other. And so this fraternity of the priesthood really is a very important element for us. Yes.
I just have to interject this, sorry. But we have forgotten so much of history with our new, everything's got to be new. Throw down the old, build new, everything's so new. But the old has lots of value too. And we don't know history. We threw that out with the baby with the bathwater. If we really know church history, we're not even allowed to breathe church in schools. But if we know church history, we know that the priests did marry, the bishops married, and they had such a big doggone mess about it with politics that things have been a lot smoother for 1,000 years with the priest who is sacrificing himself to be dedicated to what the vocation is, of being the leader of the people like a shepherd. And we just take for granted that we don't know where we came from, and we're going backwards. We're going back to a very dark age of living in sin and making other people want to condone our sins as being, okay, you can get away with it. You want to be a lesbian, marry somebody, a female or a male. I mean, we don't want to be condemned about their sins. And this amazes me in the culture that in my lifetime I've seen deteriorate. Since they threw out the 10 Commandments, it goes seems right back to 1860 when they got out of the schools. Because those are the little minds that grow into people of tomorrow. People without history, people without principles, and don't respect the dead and dig up the destroying cemeteries. What's happening to our culture? We are falling apart because we've lost God. This is a wonderful speech. I enjoyed every word of it.
It is, and I understand it, and it's a frustration. So what can you do about it?
It frustrates me to see this, the old being thrown away.
Right. So what can you do about it? So that's, I guess, getting back to the question, what can we do? Basically, we can get back on track and allow God to take care of it, because only He can. Yeah. Yes, Mr. Mike.
Yeah, no, so again, for me, one more question.
Mr. John, back up to your comment. How do we get our families back? Church.
Yeah. This is a really hurtful experience, without a doubt. It is, chatting with Father Miron earlier, and you think, well, what can you do? And basically, it's the witness, and you can't force, you can't, while the person, as long as you live under my roof, you're going to church. Well, there's some benefit to that, so and it's done, you can kind of handle that. But you get a little bit older, and, well, no, I don't need this anymore. Well, I think we need to try to help them to understand what they really need. I think we need to remind them that we're really concerned about them. We were talking again earlier about what could be done. In the cathedral, they just recently got these stands for the front of the church with sand in them, little pots of some sort. Yeah, and they put candles, you know, instead of the little plastic or vigil lights. They really went back to the thing, and it looks very orthodox, forbid, you know, but it's up in the front of the church. And again, what used to be, right? We used to put the candles up in the front of the church, and then people get shy, and so we put them toward the back so they wouldn't have to, you know, interrupt the order of the service or anything with having people moving in and out and all around. But the idea is that while you're in the liturgy, there are experiences of perhaps a deceased person that you want to remember that that person is in church with you. And might not be a deceased person, but getting back to Mike's question, it could be your son or daughter. And you could say, okay, now, if he's not here physically with me, I'm putting a candle up in front. But I think you have to tell the person, you know, you don't go to church with me every week, but every week there's a candle up there in front. And Mike mentioned, well, they'll come to church to please me. It's not bad. You know, I mean, you don't want to throw a guilt trip on anybody, but on the other side, if you're guilty, be guilty. Don't want to shame you, but yeah, all right. If you're guilty, you feel guilty, yeah, you're supposed to feel guilty. You don't know when you're guilty. But I really think, again, I'll tell you the whole story that I was talking to Father Mira. I was coming back from Indianapolis last Sunday, and I stopped at a Bob Evans for a little meal, and I was sitting there by myself, obviously, and I got my little hamburger, and this lady comes up. I'm just about finished eating, and she says, can I sit down? And she had a young lady in her 20s, a little 4-year-old boy next to her. And she said, I said, sure. Oh boy, here comes, you know, we're traveling and we need $20 for gas. Yeah, okay, I can handle it. You know, I just happen to have an extra 20. I'm ready. She says, I just want to tell you that I bought your meal. I paid for your meal. And I said, well, I appreciate it, but believe me, I can't afford to pay this meal. And she said, no, she said, we know that there are people who, if she thought I was just lonely, you know, and that I was by myself, but whatever thing she was thinking, that she was going to do this. And she said, yeah, our church, we're doing this, especially at this time of the year, as an all-out effort. And she handed me this, like a business card that had the church on it and the Twitter account if I wanted to follow them on Twitter. And I don't know if they had the times of their services. And she said, you know, I just want you to know that we're thinking. And she says, if you can do this, maybe you can do this for somebody else. And I thought, what a nice idea. Yeah, I think I will. But the card was my point. And then, of course, the little boy had drawn me a picture. But, so he gave me this little picture, and it was just such a delightful, wonderful experience of the day. But the card, I was thinking, you know, if we light a candle for somebody, wouldn't it be great if you had a little card there that you could give to them? And I told Father Mira, we'll do that. It was just in our conversation. I had not thought about it sooner, or I would have printed the cards. But, you know, it might just be something nice, even a magnetic card, you know, that throw out the refrigerator to say that somebody's praying for me every week, you know, maybe not every week, you know, once in a while. There's a candle up there. And, you know, yeah, candles cost money, but, you know, you don't charge $1 million for them. Whatever, you know, I mean, oh, thanks. But, I think, honestly, there are things that we can do, but there are no guarantees. There is no clear program to bring people back. You know, we hear every once in a while this come home for Christmas, or you know, that we're here for you, and you throw the billboard up, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And it may indeed just be that thing that pushes the person over. They have maybe prepared, been thinking about it for a long time, and this did the trick. Who knows? But I mean, you have experienced here a number of that sort of thing. You know, you did not plant the seed in the people who have come to your church recently. You were just here, ready to receive. And that, again, you could do, you know, what do they call it, an intervention. You know, a group of people go and sit down with an alcoholic and say, you know, you're alcoholic. You go to somebody and say, yes, you're a sinner, you need to go to church. Well, I don't know if that would have worked for me, but it may. But in truth, what really works is just reminding, a constant reminder, leaving bulletins behind, reminders of childhood experiences and good things. But most of it all, mostly, I think it really is that I'm concerned about you, and I'm really going to do my part to make sure that you don't miss out on salvation. And again, no guarantee, and certainly no guarantee for timing. It well may be 30 years after we're dead.
Well, maybe at this point, we'll stop the formal part of our question and answer. Certainly the bishop has touched on many wonderful points, starting with the assembly, fellowship, family. There's just so much, and I know, I'm thinking to myself, so many questions that I should ask this and I could ask that I wouldn't expect there isn't anybody here who doesn't have a question or something else that they'd like to share. So maybe at this point, Bishop, thank you for as much as you have shared with us, as many questions as you have given, not questions you have given us, answers you have given us to want to ask more questions, I guess is the best way to say that. But certainly, I think if people want to stay and talk with the bishop yet, you're welcome to visit around and talk to a few more people if you have time. But maybe everybody's ready to stand up and stretch a little bit, and we can sort of call this point to a conclusion and mingle a little bit, and you might have a personal question or something to ask of each other. But certainly a lot of things have been raised, and if I might share one thought about this assembly, and I'm working on it here with our church as well, as part of a committee, but it leads us to personal responsibility and prayer. And for a man, that's hard because it'd be easier to come up with a list of 10 rules as opposed to pray that God do His work through you. That's not so easy to do. I mean, it's very difficult. And assembly is such a broad concept that there is, it's like a cosmos type effect, and putting God in charge. And so it's very, very interesting. We all have our work cut out for us.
It takes courage.
Yes, it does. Mm-hmm. So all right, let's... since we're all over Byzantine rite, we'd like to sing No Hayalita for you, Bishop. No Hayalita.